Well, it's always an honor to work with him. I actually spoke with him about it before we shot La La Land together, so I was hoping he would still have it in mind when we were finished with La La Land, and he just jumped right in. He jumped into the research. He started taking flying lessons. He met with the Armstrongs. He got to know the family. He's not just a great actor. He's a full-on filmmaker. It's a real joy.
I think he has an instinct for what is good, and he has really high standards. And he will not sacrifice until he gets those. Like, it's almost similar to the astronauts in the moon mission. Like, it must be excellent, or he's going to redo it, and he doesn't care if that means he's up for 2 weeks straight, 20-hour days. Like, it's going to be excellent.
I think the most difficult thing in a way is that there's actually so little that's known about Neil. Neil was such a private individual. Even though he was so famous, he kept his emotions so in check. So I think Ryan and I and the rest of the team, we had to go that extra mile to work with his family, who were so generous with us, his kids, Rick and Mark, his wife, Janet, his biographer, Jim Hansen, whose book we were basing the movie on. So, I mean, we had a lot of support, but the challenge was to try to get under the surface.
I think it's the human side of the story that I find so fascinating. It's the fact that, ultimately everyone wants to see someone as a hero, and really he was a human being who had all sorts of pain and sorrow and difficulty in his life, and that doesn't just go away because you get to land on the moon. It follows you there, unfortunately. That
untold aspect of the story, the hidden sort of side of Neil, the emotions that maybe we didn't know about, elements in his past we didn't know about, and also just try to really show what those 7-8 years of his life were like, how hard it was. Because I think we sometimes take for granted just how insanely difficult and dangerous the mission to the moon really was.
I think there's often that thing that behind every man there's a strong woman, which I sort of think, is a cliche for a reason. And I think that Janet was working very hard in a very different way. She didn't go to space and she didn't land on the moon, but if she had, she was an amazing astronaut. And she did something which was, she brought up her sons, and they're two beautiful, amazing, well-rounded, strong men, so she did a great job.
The things I had to do with were the mechanical things. Where the switches are, what they do, how you get into a spacecraft, how you move around inside, those kinds of things. Translating a book into a movie is a very difficult thing, and they need somebody that they can ask questions of as they do these for a movie. And most of the people making the movie have never been in space, so they have a lot of questions, and I found that I answered lots and lots of questions. I had long talks with Ryan Gosling and the rest of the crew, explaining what it was all about being an astronaut and how you work and how you act and that sort of thing.
I met him in a bar in New York, and he said he wanted to do it in camera, and he wanted to do it on location, and he wanted to do it practically, which is everything I always do. So, we did Dunkirk and we did many Interstellar, stuff like that. So to then tackle this was fabulous.
So what film would you say in the history of movies do you think captures what it's actually like to be in space more so than anything else? What's the most authentic in your eyes?
Oh, I don't think there's any question about it. Space Odyssey 2001. That's probably the best movie that's ever been made. And it clearly showed what it was like being in space. And it's kind of interesting because that's such an old movie.
So my next question is, what is it like being in space? It seems mad.
Well, space is very benign. People don't really understand this when I say going into space is like going home. Human beings are very adaptable to space. In fact, so adaptable that you begin to think there's a little genetic thing in your mind that says, hey, this is like comfortable like home, which makes you wonder, we've been there before, kind of thing.
The task is, well, the history is there, so we then have to decide, design-wise, what's our methodology to make you guys, the audience, not question where you are and to stick with the film and get immersed in it. So the design task, I mean, obviously we did El Largo, Mission Control, and these neighborhoods, and you want this romanticism, which is all design. And but in terms of the missions, you have to try and immerse the audience. So you can't use CGI. You have to use a multi-technique process. So really the challenge design-wise going to space was just putting you guys there and then the other half of the movie, which is this great sort of tragedy, romance, family story, was designed. It's about finding the neighborhoods that can give you that sort of 50s, 60s American dream.
This is our fourth movie between me and Damien, and I love working with him. We've known each other since we're 18. We're so in sync creatively, and I have so much respect for him. I trust his vision so much that it makes it easier for me. I know what to aim for, at least after talking with him, after working with him through each piece of music and understand. The whole movie is in his head years before he ever makes it. So I really know, or I can figure out what to aim for just by talking to him, because he's so good at describing what it's going to feel like and what he wants the music to do in the movie.
Ai-Ling recorded real rockets taking off, and which were used on those launches, but they're also hearing the astronauts talk. So we wanted it to be real. So that was one of the trickiest things about the film is being able to hear what they're saying, but feeling that.
Early on in pre-production, he had worked with animatics. So as to see what to shoot, and also in it there's some rough sounds, and he had some film references for us, such as to watch Das Boot, just to feel because they are in these confined, tight, dangerous metal craft some sorts, and just to show that you feel, even though the craft is seems solid, but you hear every creaks and groans that at any moment something could go wrong and they could all die. And
we're very obsessive about our work and the things that we're passionate about. We just get really, really into it, and we give them everything we have, and that's something that has been the case with some of the heroes of his movies along the way. Different levels of sacrifice, different types of sacrifice, but I love the characters in his movies and how passionate they are about what they do.
I mean, I did La La Land with him, and going from La La Land to this film was basically a completely different type of film. And what's interesting is that which I agree to as well. I love to do that as well. You have to base the style of the film in the script and what the script is looking for. The script tells you what it wants. And this film needed realism. He was very keen to make it a film that felt it was made in that time, in the 60s, as a cinema verite type of documentary, following this family, watching this intimate moments with his family as a cinema verite style documentary. Almost like we're a super small crew just following them around. He happens to work at NASA, so we go with him to space, And when you're in that space, how scary and raw and claustrophobic it must feel to be locked inside those tiny, tiny space capsules.
I've loved being able to learn some new stuff, getting to work with, learn some electronics, learning vintage synths, modular synthesizers, the theremin, learning how to record, produce music. It was really fun. It was a little scary at the beginning, knowing that I couldn't just rely on the skills that I'd been studying in college.
He was very keen to make it a film that felt it was made in that time, in the 60s, as a cinema verite type of documentary, following this family, watching this intimate moments with his family as a cinema verite style documentary. Almost like we're a super small crew just following them around. He happens to work at NASA, so we go with him to space, And when you're in that space, how scary and raw and claustrophobic it must feel to be locked inside those tiny, tiny space capsules. So all of that had to do with trying to capture that as raw and real and emotional as possible. And so his idea was to shoot it almost like a cinema verite documentary in 16mm with a zoom, like they would have done back then. So I was totally in for that. But as we developed the work, we realized we could actually work emotionally with the cameras, so that the more sort of intimate and close we were to Neil and his feelings, we went Super 16. And when you come to the moon, it's like the absolute opposite, being a large format IMAX 70mm film, which is so surreal that it's like the opposite from humanity. is that. So we worked with the formats that way, like emotionally, and but generally it was like meant to capture like loneliness, grief, and you know, there's a lot of like metaphors for death and for sacrifice. You know, like we have a lot of black space, like space as well as black, but also black space in the shadows, in the interiors of the homes. But so we just started over, you know, from what we did with La La Land, and try not to think about anything you've done before, just think with a fresh mindset, you know.
It's a big responsibility. I've had the occasion to do it before, so putting on those shoes, if you will, was not a new thing for me, and so I understood and will continue to be grateful for the opportunity to represent someone's real life, and hopefully in a way that is true to their own spirit and true to their lives, and to honor their family and to the man himself. So, you know, research, and that's really the key.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey You Guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yes.
Nice.
Hey